Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
I'm Dave Geller, manager of Thievery Corporation Emeritus, right here on Promoter 101 podcast with Dan Steinberg.
Well, it's the crossover episode of Promoter 101 with Tour Manager 101. The podcasts have come together. The 101s have combined. I guess you could call this the 202 podcast if you add it all together, Luke. I'm Dan Steinberg, hanging out with my good friend W. Luke Pierce from Works Entertainment.
Dan, great to be here. And I always love a really good origin story, Dan. So I'm really glad to be at the beginning of this podcast central universe here that we're creating between the Promoter 101 podcast, episode 223 today, and then our friends joining us later on the podcast from the TM 101 podcast. It's the Tour Management 101 podcast. If you haven't heard this podcast yet, they've been doing this largely during the pandemic, beginning around March of last year, and have just dropped so many amazing episodes, a lot of great content, a lot of great interviews and discussions about important things for people out on the road. And we are excited to have them on our podcast here today. So joining us later on, we've got Adriane Biondo, Mary Jo, aka Jo Kaczka, Doug Wilson, Henry Bordeaux, Mark Clark, friend of the podcast, Jim Runge, and David 51 Norman. Those are the hosts every week, Dan. We need a bigger marquee for them every week for the TM 101 podcast. They're going to bring all their world's experience to our show, talk a little bit of how they started this podcast and how it's been in the last 9 months of this global pandemic and the silver linings that may be ahead. I'm looking forward to it.
Not one host, not two hosts, not four hosts, fucking 7 hosts, Luke. They pack so much punch in every episode. 7 hosts. Just like a comic book crossover coming to the podcast world, TM 101, Promoter 101, it had to happen.
You know, Dan, I think with 7 people, you'd think that for a bunch of tour managers, they'd have a much bigger rider for the recording of this podcast, but they were surprisingly easy to fit into this Zoom session.
Very agile and so much fun. And plus, from the other side of the pond, ILMC's own Greg Parmley is going to be here with a preview of their virtual conference this year. Luke, we should be there drinking at the bar at the Royal Garden Hotel in Kensington. But this time around, to keep it safe and keep it level, we're going to log onto our computers and save those travel miles for next time, I guess. ILMC coming up very soon, and Greg's going to break it all down for us.
Man, I'm missing all of our friends at the bar at the Royal Garden Hotel in Kensington. Can't wait for the next time we can all get together here, but really glad to be talking about ILMC. That's the International Live Music Conference, number 33. It's coming to virtual later on this podcast.
It's going to be a good time, and I can't wait. Should we start the show, Luke?
I think so, Dan. Episode 223 of Promoter 101 starts right now.
This is Dave Brooks with Amplify Media on Promoter 101.
News of the week.
Luke, so much going on in the music industry, and most of it's right in the 615, right in your hometown. What can you tell us about these 2 big stories breaking right now?
Well, Dan, it's been a crazy morning in the world of country music. For anyone really in the music business waking up today, I think the number one story that everyone saw was the disappointing behavior by Morgan Wallen, the country music star signed to Big Loud and to Republic Records, that broke news on Wednesday morning that saw a complete backlash. And I've got to be honest, I've never seen such an instantaneous backlash of an entire artist in recent memory, where Wallen's content being removed from several digital service provider playlists, from CMT, his eligibility for award shows stripped, and started off in the morning with Cumulus and iHeart removing him from 1,000 stations in airplay. This was a guy that was literally on the radio every half an hour across America a week ago, and right now is finding himself suspended in his record contract deal and removed from nearly every platform of meaning. quite a shocking story. I think it's something that a lot of people didn't expect from the country music community, which has had its history of repeat offenders with some very questionable and downright disappointing behavior, and a long line of forgiveness behind that. But Morgan obviously is one of the most rising stars in all of music, I would say, in the past 12 to 18 months. And for this to happen like this is a pretty shocking display of and condemnation of this behavior by the music business. And to me, I think, Dan, it's a really proud moment. It's one of those things that, this is clearly reprehensible behavior from a pattern kind of individual that has had this type of behavior inside of a business that has generally been forgiving of that. And for the business to take a handbrake and to say, listen, this isn't okay. We need to address these types of behavior. We need to hold these people accountable and have conversations about this and make sure there are consequences to those types of actions is something that we have not seen previously.
Well, let's also talk about the fact that he had already been given forgiveness with a smaller degree with the Saturday Night Live COVID stunt a few months back, where they allowed him to come back and make that show up, which in a Saturday Night Live world is huge. So he'd already had one big misstep publicly in this news cycle, so to speak. So I don't know that he's going to get the forgiveness on the second pass, as this one seems to be a much bigger level. And I'm not so sure he's going to get a second shot here.
It's certainly much different than not wearing a mask, right? What he said and what he did and lobbing a racial slur like that at his neighbor is deplorable, reprehensible behavior. I don't think you can equate the two in terms of the scale of the difference between the two, but I think it's this type of stuff has been plaguing country music for quite some time. And to see it kind of almost feels like a changing of a guard in terms of industry standards and the way that they deal with this. If this is the way that artists are going to be held to a standard in 2021, I'm quite frankly here for it. I think it'll help promote the kind of healthy growth and change and conversations that we need to have as a music business, and particularly in country music, to grow and learn and be a more understanding of people.
It's like you almost expect the artist to be a role model for our children.
This isn't certainly a shut up and sing kind of situation by any means. This is definitely, quite frankly, the opposite of this. And to be in the middle of this, obviously disappointing for a rising young star to kind of have this taken away from it, but certainly a different sign of the times.
All right, and then on the other side of the coin, can you tell us about Brothers Osborne?
A great piece breaking on the same morning here. This is definitely a longer lead piece that clearly had been planned by TJ Osborne of Brothers Osborne, the CMA award-winning, Grammy-nominated group that has been taking country music by storm in the past couple of years. The duo brothers of John and TJ. There's a nice Time article this morning about TJ coming out to the world for the first time, openly admitting he's a gay man in country music and ready to tell his story, which was met with some amazing applause and encouragement from the country music community and a lot of the women of country music community stepping forward to welcome him and to offer his story, which was a really encouraging thing to see. It just feels like a very different country music industry and a different style of leadership than what has been previously felt in the past. And I got to say that it's certainly representing kind of a changing of the guard and changing of understanding around things. These are two very different experiences that are happening with two rising artists today, and to see one celebrated in such a way is a pretty cool thing as well too.
TJ is one of the great hangs out there if you get a chance to meet him. He's a role model for all, and I'm thrilled that he was able to come out.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's news or not, but it seems like the industry has found a new platform in Clubhouse. Luke turned me on to this a couple weeks ago, and it seems like in record numbers, particularly the tech, currency, finance folks, and the music industry have really found their way to Clubhouse. Luke, have you been experimenting with this much? And how have you found it?
Dan, I've been on Clubhouse since about November of last year, and I got into the Foirero because I was really interested in venture capital, and a lot of the VC and finance Twitter community had found their way into this platform. But it's gone through an amazing transformation past month and a half with an influx of users and celebrities onto the platform. Most notably on last Sunday, recording this podcast on Wednesday, Elon Musk joined in a Clubhouse room, which pretty much blew up their servers. Right now, this is one of those tech platforms that you're going to hear a phenomenal amount about because they're now, looking at $1 billion valuation with 1 million users, growing rapidly. But for a drop-in audio chat room, it's essentially just a live conference call that you're sitting in listening to and can kind of be called into. It's become quite the repository for people of music, culture, finance, I mean, it's been a nutty place to hear people talk about GameStop and AMC and everything going on in the marketplace this week. But the music business has definitely found a good corner of this. And there's been a great community of A&Rs that have put together some great chats over the past couple of weeks. A lot of independent artists flocking to the platform and looking to connect. And so I've enjoyed a lot of the conversations. I like to throw them on during the day whenever something interesting is popping up and listening to them almost like some sort of, radio while at work. And then the evening time, we're definitely seeing a lot of traffic from music business folks and people diving into it. So a lot of great stuff on there. I wouldn't take any financial advice from anyone right now, but if you're looking for any tips on A&Rs and independent music there's a lot of great resources for people on that platform.
All right, but as far as the content, it seems to be hit and miss. Some of these rooms are filled with people that are in like 15 different rooms a day. You got a lot of speakers that really aren't, I don't know, anybody in our industry wouldn't consider them like high-level players, just making a full day of doing nothing but filling these rooms. And then there are some really good people that do moderate rooms. So trying to find the right people seems to be hit and miss. So I think shopping around for the right platform and the right conversation that suits you and entertains you is probably a little bit of a user preference?
I would agree. I mean, you definitely need to filter out and look at who's moderating some of these rooms and kind of, there's a really great profile bio section in Clubhouse that makes it really clear what people are doing at work. And if you're seeing people that are doing independent work versus an SVP A&R at a major label and, a C-suite something or other at a publishing company getting together with a well-known producer, that you have to understand there's on every platform charlatans left and right. So steer clear of the ones that are not, verified in their work, really. And I think you'll have a great experience on it. But there's definitely a lot of people out there hustling and honking and trying to make a name for themselves in it. And it's working. A lot of people are building audiences that way.
Some of the entertainment side of it's really finding its way too. Tori Spelling and Perez Hilton had their own room last night with a couple thousand people paying attention to them gossiping, which I thought was kind of fun. Like dessert to my day.
That sounds incredible. That's the kind of stuff that I would tune into and obviously enjoy. That kind of stuff is great audio entertainment, Go check it out. Clubhouse, it's the next unicorn for sure. It's headed for a multi-billion-dollar valuation. Andreessen Horowitz backing the platform. These are all major names, companies that you've heard in the past. Andreessen Horowitz, of course, being early investor in some of Silicon Valley's biggest tech platforms and Facebook among them. So headed to more of our everyday vernacular and, quite frankly, everyday use. Check it out. If you need an invite, hit somebody else. I don't think I have any left.
Hey, this is David Britz from Works Entertainment, and you are listening to Promoter 101.
Dan, it's that time of year where people from all around the world hopping on a plane to head to London, England for the International Live Music Conference. That is ILMC, which is in its 33rd year as a music conference. This is the world flagship event. It's Polestar outside the U.S. for those of you that are not familiar with the conference. It's promoters, programmers, festival buyers, venue owners, agents from all around the world descending on the Royal Garden Hotel in Kensington, London to talk about some of the biggest issues in music. And this year, of course, like many conferences, it is going virtual. ILMC 33 will be virtual in the first week of March. And here to tell us about some amazing programming they have going on is the head of ILMC, Mr. Greg Parmley, here to talk about his banner marquee lineup this year that includes CAA's Emma Banks, Irving Azoff, and Tim Lewicki over there doing some panels, Dan. So let's get into it.
ILMC is coming up. This year is going to be a little different than normal. It's a virtual conference. So you save yourself a flight if you want to get a little taste of the world global market in the music industry. And I honestly recommend it because when you get a little taste of how great the programming at ILMC is, you're going to want to go and be there in person next year and do the schmooze at the bar because it is the best bar in the entire concert industry that they host at the Royal Garden in Kensington. And here to talk about what's going to happen at ILMC this year is the one and only Greg Parmley. Welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be back. How are you?
I am faking it, but at a very high level.
Very good.
Online, is there going to be virtual cocktails? Are you going to send a box in advance so we can all get drunk together? Or is it BYOB? How's this going to work?
So we try to retain as much of the kind of core bits of ILMC as possible. So obviously lots and lots of panels, lots of workshops, lots of sort of like specialist tracks of content. But also around that, we've got poker still. We've got a kind of a fun quiz night. We've got the Arthur Awards, which is sort of the international live music industry's kind of Oscars, Oscar equivalent. We've got the Arthurs.
Are those going to be hosted by Emma again?
Hosted by Emma, but live from the Albert Hall this year, which is fantastic. So we're able to make use of one of the finest venues in Europe, which celebrates its 150th anniversary this year as well. That's going to be great.
Is that without an audience, though?
Yeah, so the audience will be, so all the delegates will be able to watch it within the ILMC platform. Yeah, so obviously due to social distancing, we can't actually have everybody in the room at the same time. And so it's a slightly kind of unusual one for this year, but still really excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we've got other stuff as well, so this kind of like natty kind of speed meeting things, which matches you with people that you might want to meet and hook up with and have a conversation with, big business with. But I mean, one of the things that we've found that's been so great this year, actually, albeit the format is different, and we're all in a challenging situation, is that we've got some great speakers, like really, really kind of cool. I mean, obviously, Irving Azoff is one of our keynotes, which is really fantastic. Bob Lefsetz is recording an episode of the podcast from ILMC. Emma's on a panel. We've got Tim Lewicki, Jay Marciano, lots of like really, really kind of great sort of inspirational names from the live industry.
You have Tim and Jay on the same panel? Because it would be great to hear about why Tim left AEG. They're going to have that battle out and revisit that history?
They're on the same panel. I can't possibly kind of predict what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a great session. And then, I mean, in terms of sort of different kind of topics and tracks as well, we're launching this sort of new platform this year called Pulse, which is really looking at the intersection between new technology and the live industry. So I mean, a lot of content on streaming this year, but really profiling some of the coolest kind of new upcoming tech products that there are, and having a conversation about really how tech is increasingly influencing the live show. And that's a specific sort of day-long event. And there's also another sort of day-long track as well, which is the Touring Exhibitions Meeting, which is another event actually, which was I think in LA last year, which is coming sort of sitting inside of ILMC. And then around that as well, we've got Green Events and Innovations Conference looking at sustainability across the industry, ILMC Production Meeting, which is a whole day really looking at the kind of the sharp end of the business and production issues. It's kind of like a week-long event as normal, with a lot going on. So
the event is still on, no risk of getting sick, and yet you can still catch up on all of the things and all the changes that have happened over the last year. Probably a lot of insight that we'll pick up in the next 30 days will be able to be rolled out at that event, because I think we're going to have a better picture of where the world is coming back into the event space at the beginning of March opposed to currently today. Because it seems like every day we learn a little more.
Look, I mean, ILMC in March last year was the last point that really the industry was up and running, right? It was the last point that people were together. The coronavirus was appearing. It was becoming more serious. It hadn't really taken a hold yet. And so ILMC this year, we're 1 year in, and actually it feels like we're at that point where there's a lot to talk about in terms of the recovery, what that looks like, and getting everything back up and running again. And also, you can attend and turn up wearing your pajamas. So, I mean, what's not to love, right?
I don't know about anybody else, but I've always found that that's the genius of the Royal Garden is you can go down in your robe and sit in the panel and no one's going to say nothing about it. So long as you remember to close your robe. Right?
So no change there then, right?
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about the breakfast meeting is no matter who our dear friend is interviewing, you can be in your robe because it's okay to go to breakfast in your robe.
Absolutely. It's probably...
In fact, I challenge you next year when we go back to ILMC in person in 22 that we both attend the breakfast meeting in our robes together.
Challenge accepted. Let's do it.
Game on.
Fantastic. No, look, I think it's going to be a really interesting event this year. I mean, it's a new thing. Obviously, it's virtual. We very much hope it will be our one and only virtual ILMC. But let's see. There's a lot of conversations to have at the moment. There's a lot of really important stuff to be said and to communicate. And I'm looking forward to kind of getting stuck into it.
I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a good time. The Arthur Awards, possibly the best awards in the industry. For God's sake, you guys always give out the best assistant award. And I think every other industry and every other award should also honor the assistants. I think that is, without a question, the best category in the entire platform of award.
Thanks, Dan. We're actually on a sort of similar track. We introduced an Unsung Hero Award this year, actually, as well, which is really just recognizing, some of the amazing work that's been done completely selflessly by individuals across the industry as well in the last 12 months. So I think that's on a sort of similar level. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing just the nominees for that read out as well, because there's been so many people have stepped up, and I think it's important to have at least something that in a small way that actually recognizes that work.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Dan. See you soon.
Hey, you can register now for ILMC. It's virtual at ILMC.com. It's March 3rd through 5th, 2021. That's the year we're in. And it's all online. That's what we mean by virtual.
Ba-bam!
Hello there. This is Dave Shapiro from UTA, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
The show's called Promoter 101, so we're here to talk about some of the tweets that have hashtag Promoter 101 from the mind of Mr. Dan Steinberg. He had a few things this week that I like, Dan. Here, let's start here. Trump just claimed that he had more American flags at his inauguration.
I mean, he's not on Twitter anymore, but I think he actually would have said it had he been allowed to tweet it. Just saying.
It would have been a perfect thing for him to think about. Those 400,000 flags that I caused, I would have more of them for sure.
I really don't miss him.
No?
Not at all.
Yeah, it's nice just having a real boring government. Dan, I see you must have been brushing up on one of my favorite reads, When I Stop Talking, You'll Know I'm Dead, by the late, great Jerry Weintraub, because you quoted him this week saying, buy your own steak. It's cheaper.
Great documentary. Amazing book. Jerry is a legend. If you don't know the stories, you got to check it out. The documentary's good. The book's good. And unlike a lot of people that write the book and they make the documentary and the same stories, for the most part, different stories. There's some fan favorites, Elvis and Sinatra and both. But for the most part, different stories. Same theme, but more. It's like the best of part 2.
The best of part 2. I got to check out that documentary, Dan. I still haven't seen it, but it's one of my favorite books, and I recommend it to all of our readers. You're also quoting out some more awesome fortune cookie wisdom. Dress British, think Yiddish. Love that.
Pretty sure this came from the Lou Wasserman documentary, which is so good. Really finding a love for the old Hollywood stuff right now and catching up on how it all works. I suggest this at the highest level. Lou Wasserman documentary, amazing.
Be sure to check that out. And whatever Dan is saying on Twitter, go follow him. He's at the Jew on Twitter. More tweets over there.
Over there, over there, over there.
Over there. Dress British, think Yiddish.
Hi, I'm David Kells with Bridgestone Arena and the Nashville Predators, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
All right, here for the main event, we've got the co-hosts, co-creators, co-founders. They do it all, the showrunners for Tour Management 101. Welcome to the podcast. We've got Adriane Biondo, Jo Kaczka, Doug Wilson, Henry Bordeaux, Mark Clark, our friend Jim Runge, and David 51 Norman. For those of you who don't know those names, those are some of the biggest names in tour management, and they are about to sit down and talk about this amazing podcast they've put together.
We're so thrilled to have you all here. Let's start out with, how did the podcast come together? TM101 is such an educational platform. The group of you being such a diverse group of tour managers, how did you guys all find each other?
I think we all have a different angle. Everyone should go around and say it because it happened differently for all 7 of us.
Well, Mark can start off the story. He actually was sort of the catalyst of all of this.
Yeah. So we were all going into the unknown of the quarantine, and COVID-19 was starting to come into our world. A lot of us were trying to kind of bunker down and figure out what's next and try to ride this out. A lot of people started posting on that forum, BobNet, big community board for our industry, to see what everyone's doing. And I started seeing the common stream of people were doing webinars and live streams and different podcasts and things like that. And a lot of people were trying to teach their profession, try to find some way to make use of the time. I started seeing that trend start to build. One day was like, hey, does anyone want to learn tour management? And the response ended up being well received. I knew that this wasn't going to be a solo endeavor. I'd put on the post, there's a lot of incredible tour managers in this forum. I'd love to team up with some people and see if we can put something together. And I know that Henry and Jim were 2 of the first people to chime in and were like, hey, yeah, we're interested. Like, let's do this. And then it started to roll from that.
Was this all a catalyst of your Facebook Live post that you were doing like in the first days of the lockdown? You were going live during the first couple of days, showing your poster collection and what there was like this stir crazy like action from you, where you were just going live on Facebook 5-6 times a day or something.
Yeah, I mean, I started test running ways to do different type of live platforms. Like I went live on Instagram Live first to see how the response was around that. And then I did an event page for Facebook Live to see how the response was on Facebook Live as well. And trying to incorporate things that I'm passionate about, which I thought people might be passionate about to try and get an audience. And concert art is something that I'm very passionate about and have a really wide collection in from the tour world. And it was well received, but I don't think that was a major play in the tour management direction. I think just seeing the forums start to be consistent around people teaching different avenues in our touring industry, that I was like, okay, I haven't seen anyone post anything about tour management yet. So let me see if people are interested in that.
Yeah. And when I saw that post, I was like, oh, this is something that I've been wanting to do, because for a couple of years now, I've been doing just impersonal one-on-one small class mentoring stuff. And I had always wanted to build like a workshop for this kind of stuff in Los Angeles, but it was COVID. And I was like, this is my opportunity. Let's jump on this. I'd love to talk and teach and mentor. And then that's when Jim and I basically jumped on the same time. We're like, yeah, we'd contribute to something like that. We've had a lot of history with speaking on panels at TourLink in the past. It just kind of snowballed from there. Doug was in on it early, and it was kind of the four of us at first, but then we were like, we need some women in here. And so that's when we called up Adriane and MJ. We're like, come on, you got to join us on this.
I had actually messaged Mark when they had posted that they were going to do a webinar. And it was 4 dudes. And I was like, there's a lot of women doing this. And I think it would be good to have some women on there, whether it's this one or if you guys do another one. And I said I would be interested, and also threw out some names of some other women that I thought would be good. And then didn't hear anything until an hour before they did the first one. And Mark messaged me, he said, you want to hop on? And I was like, okay. and here we are.
For me, I have always enjoyed working with Henry. I too went to TourLink quite a bit. Jim and I would go and try and support the community efforts being done there. And that's actually when I first met Henry. He was a panel coordinator, and we had dreams about doing certain panels. And we had this ongoing conversation for a couple of years running about this 1 or 2 particular panels that we wanted to do. And we couldn't figure out how to position them in a way that they would have been widely received. So we had a history of talking about that, and this began to develop on Facebook on this post. And when Henry chimed in, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Now Henry's in, and that gives us an opportunity to literally maybe do the things that we've been talking about doing. And then we had this call, our first Zoom call, and much to my delight, my colleague and one of my dearest friends on the planet, Jim Runge, is there with his suit. And my friend Mary Jo, who we met at TourLink and we've never worked together. The joy here is that you never get to collaborate with other amazing colleagues and tour managers. So for us, this has been like kid in the candy store type stuff. We have learned so much from one another.
At TourLink, you're talking to each other. The secrets are staying in the room, and how to deal with a tour manager is never really addressed at Polestar or Billboard or IEBA or APAP. And I think you guys doing a podcast has put it out there that people that want to work on all the other sides of the business are understanding how to interact with you guys and what your challenges are and what your pet peeves are. So I think you guys are bringing things to the light, and maybe some of the other conferences should start inviting you guys a little more often.
One thing we quickly established when we started this, because as the guys have said, we were all kind of working on ideas separately and then came together as a collective. One concern I had was having 7 tour managers running a panel. Was there going to be too much alpha energy? Tour managers don't typically work in panels of 7 together. I wondered how that dynamic was going to play, how we were going to disseminate, the information between ourselves and not be speaking over each other and covering the same topic. So that's something we had to sit down and plan and refine. If you look back at our first episode, we personally feel like we've come a long way since then. That was just that kind of 7 people talking at each other for a while, getting really excited to tell stories.
The genius of that broken up too with your diversity throughout the industry and throughout the world. I mean, you guys are all based in different parts of the country, or in Doug's case, the world, which is different acts that you guys tend to work with. It's just the vibes that you guys all bring and the different experiences together. The random sampling of the industry is really well done.
I think we had learned from being at TourLink and Polestar that we actually enjoyed. I think that's where kind of the fire came from, of the collaborations that we'd all done. And we knew that it could work. We knew there was interest there. But I think you're right. We could now bring it to the masses. It wasn't just speaking to other tour managers or other people that were invested in the industry, but we were giving back to those people who didn't have that voice and who didn't really understand, knew they were were interested in what we did, but didn't really know what that was. So I think for us, it was a little bit of like wanting to collaborate, but also wanting to give back to the industry.
And we should mention that 5-1 wasn't actually on the first, I think he joined us on the third.
I was going to say, and then we got 5-1, and we literally got him. We got him for the show, and then we begged him to stay.
We did one episode, and we were like, "You're with us till the end."
I actually asked Henry if I could be involved because I didn't know Mark. I didn't know Doug. I knew Jim from TourLink because I used to speak on the accounting settlement panel every year. I knew MJ because we worked on King Crimson together. And then I knew Henry because we had worked on Fall Out Boy and a few other groups together. So I feel like a kindred spirit now that I know Doug, Mark, and Adriane I had met at a show, but we had never been formally kind of forged a friendship.
It was a flyby.
It was like, I'm Adriane, I'm with Mariah. Yeah. We got to run. So they're kindred spirits. And I've definitely, being that I'm the oldest on the panel, I've definitely learned quite a bit from all of them. It's been amazing. And especially with the accounting stuff, because MJ and I, we nerd out on...
We like to nerd out.
On settlement sheets and Excel spreadsheets. So I love all 6 of these guys.
Early on, we decided to be very transparent. You know, we were like, hey, we all share templates and stuff anyway, and forms, and let's just put them up on the website for students to use and download, and settlement sheets, whatever. And we're also very transparent with each other. It carries over. You know, that's something that's helped it all work. We have regular planning meetings. We're very committed to it, and really nothing's off the table. And it's kind of the same way with how we approach dealing with our students. I mean, the only thing that's really sort of been off the table is we decided really early on not to talk about COVID because we wanted these lessons to have a shelf life. We very rarely talk about it because we thought, well, this is speculative and it'll make it very dated where can talk about the nuts and bolts of tour management.
I think that's a brilliant move on your part early on to say that, because I don't know if there's been a resource, a collection of educational knowledge like what you've imparted through TM101 throughout these last 10 months. And so to have this library of knowledge for everybody out there working in the business, everybody who wants to work in the business, is just a phenomenal thing that you all have created. I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts about your show is how excited you are to talk to the next generation of tour managers and production managers that are out there on the road. Have you had any sort of experience in people reaching out to you after listening to one of your episodes, after tuning in, that's really been impactful for you as someone who creates a podcast? We can talk about some of the responses you've got as a producer of podcasts now.
I think we all have collectively been getting messages like that all year. And I think it kind of came before this. I think that's why we created it, like you said, because the body of knowledge and experience didn't exist. And so after so many decades in the business, we were like, let's just create it ourselves. And we wanted to share and give it back to future generations. And so the response that we do get from our students and just people that are watching, and it's just been so overwhelming because it really has fueled us to be able to do this for so long. And the responses come from all over the world, to see students from Australia or South America, the UK, to see them come from different levels and experiences. Either they're college students just finishing their second or last year of college trying to get into the business, or they're a couple of years in and want to level up. But we also have this huge network of the pros and legends in this industry that follow us. So we really love that we've been there for a very big, broad spectrum of people in this industry.
I think even on a mental health note side, I get a constant message here and there that students have said that this webinar has kept them going throughout the year. And that's something I think is very special that I don't take for granted, that they didn't know what they were going to do this year, and that this class has helped them stay focused and given them hope. And that's very special to me personally.
The thing that I have found is that we have several of our mentors that we look up to have actually emailed us or texted us and said, hey, I heard about TM101. Is there a possibility I can be involved, on a particular show, which I find kind of fascinating. And the other thing I find quite amazing is that when we're looking for guests for our shows, we try to go after our mentors. We go after like the Rob Halletts, Ina Jacobs, because the thing is, they could always say no. But if they say yes, we're like, holy shit, we got them on our show. And then we'll have like this huge panel of like these power hitters in our industry that are on our TM101s. And that's where I'd love to hear and listen and learn from them also. So that's my 2 cents.
Like having Marlene Tucci and Emma Banks on together. That was amazing.
I'd have to agree.
We really love to ignore anyone that hasn't agree to do our show. They're not in the industry until they've done our show. So until they like agree to come on, they just don't exist in the industry as far as the show is concerned. That way it's like they have to live in the conversation. So,
I feel like I didn't exist in the industry until I started doing this. As you'll have heard from my colleagues, none of them knew me before this, even though MJ and I lived in the same city for a while.
I don't know how we never met.
You know, I've been based in Canada and Scotland for my touring career. So there is a world outside the TourLink US crew tight-knit community. There's a whole world of people touring out there. And it's even surprised me, some of the people in Spain, France, Germany, but then also even further afield. You know, our Henry made a great presentation to us with our stats from where people watch our show from. And it's incredibly diverse and countries that I can barely even pronounce. So it is amazing. To an earlier point, I think Mark and I being the sort of most recent into the industry, I think the diversity of experience can be a good thing. I sometimes feel embarrassed when we have a guest on who has such incredible experience. And, you know, I've been in the industry 10, 11 years, and I feel kind of embarrassed to be on talking about tour management when there are so many wonderfully intelligent, experienced people out there. But what I've come to realize is that having been in a van most recently, there is value to that to our students, and I can relate to them on a more recent level with my personal experiences. So I think getting a broad spectrum of what you can experience in this industry recently and currently, I think is useful for us.
For sure.
I think your global view brings a lot to the table. The younger, the older, the experienced, and the different point of view. The van world is something I think everyone should have to learn from the early get-go. Spending early days on the road in vans, you don't get to know people nearly as well anywhere else in the world until you're stuck in a van with somebody on an 18-hour drive, like trying to cover 1,500 miles between gigs, like night after night. Like that's when you really test a relationship. You talked about the guests and programming. Can you guys talk about that? Because getting guests early on can be tricky. And you guys have established your brand now, but in the early days, convincing people that this is not just a chat room, but this is going to be something of education and value and worth your time. Was that a challenge?
No.
No.
We just called all our friends. But when there's seven of you, you know, when there's seven of you and you reach out to somebody, it wasn't as hard as I feel like I thought it would be. Like people were really behind it. Plus they weren't doing anything.
I think because we came at it with like hey, we're teaching, we're doing a class. Like we never actually really call ourselves like a podcast. We're an online school.
It's a webinar. Yeah, we
were educational based, and so people were caught off guard. They thought at first like we just wanted to hear their old road stories, and we're like, no, we actually want you to teach and like help us create a lesson plan, show us and share your tips and tricks. Let's, put it all on the table.
Started a time too that when people were looking for something to do, like everybody was locked down, nobody could do anything. So I think we were in a position where people were like, I'm not doing anything. What is this? Let's do it.
Also, I think that we were in a state of shock to some degree, as was everybody else, as our beloved $1 billion industry literally rolled up in a number of days. The bottom began to drop out for all of us, and we needed something to hang on to, and so did everybody else. So when we were able to reach out to people and say, hey, we're imparting information, but we're not just sitting around telling war stories. We'd love for you to join us for a prep call, and then we're going to elicit some information out of you so that we have a little bit of a structure. And as we began to do and plan our episodes, because we are all such insane planners, the natural flow of how you build a tour began to come into play organically. And so we, as we do, began to follow the path. And so the inertia of the energy that we were building towards the steps to creating a successful tour, it began to get its own energy, and it laid itself out for us. Well, then you go here, and then there's ticketing, and then there's settlement, and then wait, there is settlement in a van, but then there's a bigger settlement. So let's get Judd White and Matt Schneider. And as we began to legitimize what we were doing with our structure and flow of information, and that it wasn't just, let's just sit around and talk about what it's like to roll up to the Dunkin' Donuts arena and why you can't get your truck in the hole or whatever it is. We're really explaining by detail how you do the day. It was really compelling for people. And I'll share with you guys a comment that came in the chat on the first day. And I think that this was a very pivotal moment for all of us. Somebody put into the chat on our first episode, "A good magician never reveals his tricks." And I wrote back, "We tried that, and it doesn't really work. And besides, wouldn't we want to educate the younger generation of touring staff and tour managers so when they rock up on your tour, they show up with their proverbial shizzle together instead of, showing up and just being scattered and out there? If we're training good tour managers and good touring people to come up behind us and with us, doesn't that create a healthier industry?"
We have a history of that too. People come on the podcast because they want the exposure, and then they get on and they won't answer a question. Like, I don't want to share my secrets. Those become very short interviews with me and Luke because we're interviewing 30 seconds of them because we're not going to have them come on and say they don't answer those questions.
I think also something that has really helped a lot with guests is that, sometimes even if a guest is willing to come on, they're a bit concerned because they haven't been in front of a camera, they haven't been in front of a mic or been interviewed. And we do really extensive prep. So the day before we do a prep that's just as long as the episode. And we actually sometimes longer. I mean, honestly, all of us have been out of touch for so long that sometimes we're just shooting the shit for a couple hours, but we really have a commitment to having our guests help us shape the conversation and help us shape the topic. We go in with a loose idea of what we want the topic to be. If we're doing a class specifically, say, on advancing the tour, then yes, we're going to take that angle, but we have them really help us shape it in that prep. And I think that has been something that has been really, we've actually gotten a lot of feedback from guests that that's something that they found really special. They feel like they're really a part of shaping that lesson. It also helps them loosen up because we're having almost exactly the same conversation the next day. There's been very few times that, because I take notes during the prep and I shape those into a sort of a script.
You're amazing, by the way. Let's give props to MJ.
But there's very few times I have to slice and dice. There's some times that I have thought about, okay, what would be a better arc of the conversation? But usually we try to follow it. And our guests are very good once they get into it at really helping shape that conversation because they are the experts in the field. So I think that once people realized how that worked, they weren't really so reluctant to do it. We make them feel very comfortable, or we try.
We try to really reflect as broad of a range of experiences within the industry when we're choosing our guests, because we have 7 tour managers. If we're looking to pick guests from our network, there are so many options, and so many people have been so kind offering their time to come on and speak with us. And it's a diverse industry we work in, not just music touring. There are so many facets to touring in circus and e-games and everything like that, different disciplines within the umbrella of touring. So we want to hear from the person that's just done her first tour, as well as the guys and girls who've been in the industry 30, 40 years and have done everything under the sun. I think there's equally valid experience for both people. So we really try and, for each panel, get as broad a range of guests as we can.
The fact that you guys are doing a live show is intimidating as hell to me and Luke, because we've done a couple panels where we record these things live. But the praise I have for you guys that you guys do this multiple times a week is amazing, because you give a guest a microphone and they're going to throw you off course immediately, and you can't fix that the way we can with editing. And you put an audience in front of it, which you guys have in your chat room constantly. And regardless of where you're trying to go and how you're trying to get there, you guys have to keep the guest entertaining and educational and try to get from point A to point B in your allotted time. I know it's the internet, so you got a little bit of flexibility there, but it's only as good as interesting as the person is, and not everybody's all that interesting. So to keep them interesting, keep it on track, keep the education going, keep the message going, all at the same time is incredibly hard. And every time me and Luke have looked at doing a live broadcast, we both shriveled up and just walked away from it. I mean, even when we do the live conferences, we still go back and edit later. We never do them live.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes. A lot. We have about 4 chat windows open. We're show calling behind the scenes.
Yeah. Adriane is also our master at just gently pushing the conversation back in the direction it needs to go. Has a very amazing way of doing that.
And I have the show flow timed out to the second.
Yeah. And with 7 of us too, I think it's easier to keep it interesting and somebody's always got something to say. So I think it makes that easier because we can fill in those dead airspace with something.
We're all show callers by nature, so well.
And the show flow I write is timed, so we stay loosely to it, but we know how to throw it back and forth to each other and even swap segments if we need to. You just don't see that, but there is a lot going on. And honestly, like, I don't think nobody ever taught us how to. I mean, we all have show called or stage manager. You just do what you need to do on a gig, but there's a lot going on that we never learned how to. Nobody ever taught us how to do it in this space. And so this is just how we've always done it, is live. And so that's what we do.
Yeah, but you're all backstage, like historically. The fact that you guys are now up front and actually holding the mic and actually the ringleaders, like that's got to be a juxtaposition for all of you.
We're on stage and backstage at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We definitely are. I mean, I had a little bit of experience working in radio. So I came up around people. I watched how they did it. And so it's interesting that we have all been on the perimeters of exactly what we're doing right now. We've all watched TV, we've all listened to the radio. We've all have an idea of a standard of what looks cool or sounds cool. We're quite a discerning group of people, and we happen to have a pretty high bar. And once we realized after 5 or 6 episodes, especially, when we asked 5-1 to join us and he agreed to stay, we really realized, and also, we have to really remember that this was born out of one of the darkest times that our industry will ever see. So in this beautiful growth, we were all hanging on to something for dear life. This was really our way to keep the industry together, keep ourselves together, give ourselves a reason to get up and brush our teeth and comb our hair and show up and use our skills, and to engage our friends to come and do the same. And as we began to have guests come on, like we had Pete Beadle from NPB come and talk about why we need tour security and what has changed. Now, the NPB guys know, the tour security guys know that if they want to check in on the business or maybe learn something about how things are done differently or maybe add an opinion, they can log into the chat and they're going to find a bunch of their friends and they can come and sit in the room and just be. And if we see them, we're going to shout out to them or say hello, or they're going to shout out to one another. So it became a place where folks who were mortally wounded by their beloved, and those of us who come into this business and stay in this business, we are here with a drive and a passion because you really have to commit so much of your life to this business. To have it suddenly go away was soul crushing. So we felt like in order to not only save ourselves and contribute to somehow coming out the other side of this fortified, not just having survived ourselves and our colleagues and our industry and some newcomers. And then in the middle of everything, a civil rights movement gurgled up. And so we had even more what we felt like, I won't say issues to tackle, but bridges to gap. And we began to feel like we also had a responsibility to make sure that not only are we giving proper information, but we're making sure everybody knows that we are diversified and that we will continue to diversify and that we as a group are going to walk that talk. We're going to present ourselves. Look at us. We're about as diverse, like you said, we're about as diverse a group of people as you can get. And so we have an eye towards how we are functioning in our day-to-day as a group of people, but also how we hope to take the ecology of what we're creating out on the road with us. And we hope our colleagues and our students are learning from that example and will do the same. And so it became really, really important for us to continue because of a lot of these reasons as well.
Very well said. While we have a brain trust of some of the best tour managers in the business on here and for our audience, you've spent the last 10 or so months talking about really important issues in the world of live production and tour management. And I think that some of the challenges that we'll face in the recovery returning to a live situation have probably largely been addressed in your broadcasts and your webinars. And so I'd love to know from y'all, for our listeners, what you see as being some big themes and challenges as we start to ramp up, hopefully in the third or fourth quarter of this year, as the vaccines roll out here domestically.
what are going to be those things that we need to pay attention to, safety or otherwise, in our work and getting back to work safely?
I have been working this year, so it's been an interesting thing. I was lucky enough to find myself as a production director on the Biden campaign for about 10 weeks. And so working in a time when your industry is not working is a mind trip into itself. But then my challenges, and I think what challenges we'll see going forward as things start to open up, was just how to do it safely. I had to retrain myself and rethink the way we did everything, all with the COVID standards and practices in mind. So we had to live differently on the road. We had to be more concerned about how like everything I do is going to affect my crew, this whole operation, my artist who was a president. And so we had to take it very seriously. And so I think going into the future, we need to realize that no matter if you've been doing this a year or 20 or 30 years, there's going to be a lot of things that you need to learn and relearn. We need to be retaught on how to do this safely, so everybody can stay out on the road and the concerts can happen and we can all go back to work. But when it's time, I also hope that the mental health lessons that we've learned this year stay in place and we don't go back to the way we used to do things. We've touched on, and Adriane just said, we've spent months trying to dispel and get rid of any of the old bad habits and practices and the unhealthy macho ways of the old school road. That's all done with. We don't do that anymore. Like, we're on a better, more healthier path and practices. And so, yeah, we're walking the walk and talking the talk here on TM. And so like, once we get out on the road, we're going to actually show people like how you do this, how to be healthier, work better, work safer. I think we show that there's a lot of different ways that you can be in this industry, but the resources to do it safely and more efficiently and just healthier are out there. And that's what we are. We're here to help everyone that's going out there into the new world. We'll continue to do that. And we are getting into a place in the future where we don't know how we're going to officially like address COVID in the touring place yet, but like maybe we'll get there because we want everyone to be safe.
Well, taking it seriously the way you did obviously shows the difference between, and forget politics, but between the campaigns of how it was treated on the Biden campaign versus the Trump campaign versus the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate out of the Democratic side did not get sick. And they were able to continue to do events, even though they were smaller as drive-ins and everybody was masked and protected, versus on the Republican side, they took less precautions that you could just see. People weren't wearing masks. They were not socially distanced, and they had to stop doing events for a minute because the candidate did get sick. And regardless of your politics, the difference in precautions obviously affected the candidate getting sick. You assume at some point he interacted with someone too closely, which is what provided him to get sick, opposed to Biden and the vice president, who also did not wind up getting sick. So obviously there's something to that, and learning from that, we'll be able to keep the artists safe moving forward. And I'm guessing that means less meet and greets for the time being, but there's probably a way to take everything you've learned from the presidential tour and apply that across the industry to keeping our artists and our staffs and the road crew as safe as possible, as well as the venue and the fans out front.
100%. It's not just about like, let's all just get back out there and start touring again. We need to make sure we do this right and really step up as an industry. And I use that term loosely because I don't think we are in some ways like an industry like others are. We need to propel ourselves to become a real industry that protects itself, protects each other, and represents itself as a whole instead of, kind of what it's been built as.
And moving just beyond safety and security, there's a couple of other more practical things to consider. Budgetary considerations are obviously going to be paramount for the majority of artists. Belts are going to have to be tightened, and I think that will manifest itself across the touring spectrum. We're going to be in a very interesting point where once the green light gets given, every artist under the sun is going to want to get back out on the road and start making some money again. So there is only a finite supply of experienced touring crew as it stands. And I don't think it would be a stretch to say that a few of our number will probably have left the road and not be coming back, especially by the time we get back to it. So there's going to be a need for new touring crew across the departments on the road. And that's something that we've been saying to our students. The most common question we receive is, how do I get into touring? How do I get my start? How do I get some experience? And right now, it's very difficult to do that because there are pretty much no gigs.
But there will
One
be,
thing
and
that we
when it comes back, there'll be more than ever. I know that sound companies, bus companies, venues are all seeing runs on their product, and there's a limit to all of those resources. So crew is a big part of that. So there's going to be more opportunity than ever to find your way into that starting gate for a very restricted space normally, because you got to know someone to get in usually. But we're going to be teaching people how to load trucks and do things and learn on the fly. We're going to be throwing people in the deep end because there's going to be more tours out there than we've ever seen. As I don't know how many of you guys are seeing the calendars, but I'm sure you guys are already being held for different tours and what for, especially the ones that keep you on retainer, that your services are going to be needed more than ever as soon as the world comes back online.
Yeah, quick aside on your earlier question too, is that I think we've put an emphasis on not only the skills that takes to do our jobs and be on the road, but in mental health, physical health, we've made that as big a star in what we do as much as we have the skills that it takes to do our job. And I think that, eating right, taking time off, yoga, I think we've discussed all this stuff over the course of, the 10 months that have put an emphasis as much on mental health and physical health as we have skills, because that's something as an industry we need to start looking. I mean, I had a stroke this year. It's health is real. And, that's what we have to be aware of as much as knowing accounting. We need to know how to take care of ourselves in many ways.
We've put an emphasis on broadening the circle that you hire from, because people tend to hire from the people they know or people that get recommended to them by people they know. And we have really put an emphasis on that, which hopefully will carry moving forward for people to think about meeting people outside of their normal circles, being more inclusive of hiring, being more diverse. You might not know a lot of women who are on the road. You may not know many people of color, but there's plenty of us doing it. And, I think we've put a real emphasis on that, just to expand your hiring circles. And I'm hoping that'll be a big thing moving forward.
It's an amazing point. Jim, getting back to you in particular, your stroke, and I'm so glad that you've come through that. And at the same time, you got married during COVID too. So you've had this amazing juxtapositions. So your COVID experience among everybody's has had some serious extremes on top of it. Is it a positive thing as a road manager, knowing you're going into Coachella week? And is that you look back at that fondly that you made it through, but going in, is that a logistical nightmare for you guys when you've got Bonnaroo or Coachella or Stagecoach, something of that size, Lollapalooza? Is that you guys stay up all week terrified?
For me, if you're headlining, it's a dream. If you're anything but headlining, it's an absolute nightmare. I mean, that's my own opinion on it. Headlining it, you're king and you can maneuver yourself through the day and you have the staffing to do it. But anyone else, I hate it.
I can add to that from not being A-list. It definitely feels like things are getting cut back every year. It's being fine tuned and things are getting niched and redlined here and there. And I'm like, how do we even get into this thing now? They're like, just take a cab, just get in. I was like, transportation has to be included. They're like, No.
Dude, you're on my A-list, Mark.
You're in trouble with this when Mary Jo's here.
I've worked on both sides. So since early on, I really consciously...
When you say both sides, do you mean the festival side?
I've worked for the festival side and tour managed. So very early on, it was pretty easy to juggle both before the festival industry got really big. And then, it was kind of couldn't really do both. But for me, as a tour manager going into a festival, I was very, very forearmed. Usually I would know a lot of the people I was advancing with, but I kind of knew the tips and tricks. So for me, it was always okay, what questions can I ask to get what I want? Or I would talk to the agent and ask them to put certain things in by contract. So, but usually I think most of the festivals I've done as a tour manager was either headliner or penultimate artist. So like Jim said, it's a little easier, but I have covered for some tour managers and walked in lower down the card. And so that I would use my knowledge of how things are put together to try to do that. But it is a challenge for sure.
The festival environment, I love it. I love to go to festivals. I don't spend the week freaking out. I try to set a precedent for myself and my team. Just do your advances well. Understand what they will and will not give you. Don't come out of the gate swinging a bigger hammer because you're just one of 6 or 8. And again, if you're a headliner or you're penultimate or you're still one of a number. You're not the one. It's not your show. If you can go in there with your expectations and your artist and crew's expectations dialed in to what you're getting, and you're not expecting that it's your gig and you're going to get everything you need, you're not. So understand what you're working with. work with the people. And a lot of times, you're coming in with, you might run into your friends. The artist relations gang tend to go from festival to festival, or perhaps if you're going back to a festival with a different client. Again, one of our favorite touch points on TM101 is relationships. So you might know these people. You know what I mean? Go in, have a good time, be agreeable, understand that you have to create solutions where there might be issues, because this is an uncomfortable, you're fitting a square peg in a round hole 90% of the time. Just use your good skills and understand that you guys are partners for the day. Go in and try to make it work. And it's really about the expectations. Set your level of expectations in a realistic way. You are not going to get 3 dedicated runners and have transportation bowing, over for you and driving your people hither and yon at your whim. You're just not. So get a plan together, know what it is. If you're going to Jazz Fest, know what time the racetrack shut down and what times you can move people in and out. And if you know what you're doing and you do a solid advance, your day should be far less uncomfortable.
The systems exist for a reason.
Before we wrap up, we've talked about some pretty serious stuff about the podcast, but can we feature some of your personal experiences and talk about maybe your favorite road story without outing the artist or whatever, like just the best thing that's come or the most entertaining thing that's come for each of you on the road?
I guess I'll start it because Jim Runge and I did a summer tour with the Black Keys. I was not a TM on that, clearly, because Jim was the TM. But this is something that we share also. There's a lot of, if you're a TM, you better just stay a TM, because if you're not always a TM, then you're never going to be a TM, right? And I don't believe that. I bounce around and work in positions that I think are going to be great with great people. And so I will do production, and I was lucky enough to be a production coordinator for Jim Runge. There were 5 tour managers on that tour. Jim, myself, our production manager, our assistant tour manager, and our front of house guy were all tour managers. Yet we came together to do this one tour, or this few legs, and we had a summer tour. It was a summer festival run in Europe, and the way it was routed, it was forever mileage to get anywhere. The gigs were all thousands of miles apart, and there had to be a travel day every single day. And on that tour, Jim Runge routed us a summer vacation that we're never going to get again. The way we had it, the way we couldn't do it any other way, but to have these travel days in these amazing spots we never would have gotten to if it wasn't for the fact that we had to do these massive hauls to get back and forth across to Europe. That for me was one of the best things that I've ever done, because we had some days on that tour that really felt like we were just on a big fat summer vacation with our buds.
That'd probably go for mine too.
Hey, Runge, could you tell the story about Ralphie May at the Polestar Awards?
I had won the Polestar Award the year before, so I happened to just be in Nashville Polestars, and the Foo Fighters were in New Zealand at the time, and Gus Brandt and I had spoken that day. So I said, if you're going to win, do you want me to accept the award for you? And he's like, yes, please. Would you please go up there and accept it for me? So, one, I don't know if you remember Ralphie May, he just passed away, I think, in the last year or so. The conservative Ryman was destroyed that night because Ralphie did not tone down even as much as we think our industry is open-minded, they were not Ralphie May open-minded that night. They were.
But you, me, and
Ralphie
Zink
May
were having a blast.
Yeah,
with what he was
I was
doing.
sitting with Dan, and we were laughing our asses off. But I think we were the only people in a full Ryman that were. I think everybody else was like, he was offending everyone.
And you could see it in Sally Williams' face immediately.
Yeah, yeah. The Ryman people were not happy. Of course, Gus won, so I ran up there, and of course, nobody knew who the hell I was. But I just said, and that was, I think, right after Kanye had with
Taylor,
Kanye thing. So I announced to the audience that this was not a Kanye West moment, that Gus had asked me to accept the award for him. But I actually talked to Ralphie May after that night, and he was distraught. I had to talk him down because he was like, he thought he had messed up really badly because no one would talk to him but me after the show. But that was a pretty great night.
Awesome.
Mine's not necessarily a funny one, but it's a favorite one. And it's from one of my very, very early tours. But one of my favorite memories of tour ever is having Ralph Hutter from Kraftwerk explain the concept of the man machine to me while we were sitting talking.
I would have to say, go back to Coachella 2019. Electronic artists are really starting to think outside the box and do things differently. And a client that I was with was starting to integrate more live element, and we did not hold back for our special guests for weekend one. We had Tommy Lee, so many special drummers that came out for that show, which was just such a blessing to work with, and just a lot of big pop stars that were coming through. So having a hand in navigating working with all those camps was a big step for me. I was dealing with 6 different teams through A-list artists. Making all that happen was really special. And Coachella is always special. I'm a kid from Alabama, so to think that I made it out to this point was very special for me personally. I never thought that I would make it to this moment. So that was a big moment for me. And Tommy Lee standing behind me before he takes the stage and just holding me like it's prom. He's literally just standing behind me, just holding on to me, going, "Is it my time yet?" And I'm like, "I'll let you know." And he's just standing there for 5 minutes holding me. So,
I'd give a shout out for meeting Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and him turning up in a pair of blue jeans when my artist was wearing, suit and tie. But mine goes way back to the start, the van touring days. We turned up for a major French music festival. We were running a little late, traffic on the peripherique was what it always is. And we roll into a security roadblock, and I benefit from Francophone crew. So we had conversations. We were advised that we did not have the correct parking permit, despite displaying the one we were sent. This went on for quite a while, with it being France and all. And we were running into a hard deadline for some very important French TV promo. The whole committee thing wasn't working. So I basically just had to wait for a second for the security guard to turn his back and then gun the van past him and ended up driving in the backstage entrance with a stream of police officers, security guards, running behind me, almost like shaking their batons at my van as I'm frantically looking for your artist liaison, but not driving fast enough to be an endangerment to the people that are in the backstage area. It was this slow comedy situation. I eventually found artist liaison, parked the van, ran inside and demanded to speak to somebody as a stream of security guards ran in and started screaming in French at me and everyone involved. Just some of the things you have to do to make the show happen and make the promo happen, because we weren't moving anywhere at that point in time. So,
do you speak French, or did it just sound like gibberish to you?
I understood enough to understand that this was just a hard no, and they were going to go and call their supervisor to come and have a look at, it needed somebody to move the situation along.
Henry, you got one?
I'll give the abridged story of one that people like to hear about. Was the time that we were doing a show in Texas for the Final Four basketball games. My band got into a fight with some people in the lobby of the hotel. So I'm like, okay, everybody out of this bar, up to your rooms. They come up to my room. The band and crew and everybody start trashing my hotel room, just ripping it apart. They're on edge, just roaring because they just got into a fight, right? So much adrenaline. They start tearing apart my hotel room, breaking everything you can imagine in any which way. And there's a dozen guys in this room just breaking stuff. And so I'm packing up my clothes, putting it in the closet, right? Bellman comes up and knocks on the door and says, they're coming. And so I turn around, hey guys, the hotel's on the way up. We're about to get kicked out. Of course, what do? Everyone scatters, right? And just runs out the door, runs in the stairwell, and leaves me standing there in a busted up room. Everything's broken. 4 cops and the hotel manager come in. Manager starts freaking out at me, screaming, "You're going to pay for all this." And I'm just like, yep, no worries. We'll take care of it all. He has the cops put me in handcuffs and they take me out of the hotel. Going down the elevator, the cops, they take me out, put me in the back of the car. They start driving down the road. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to jail. Somebody better bail me out so I can fly home tomorrow. And the cops go about a 5-minute drive and then turn into another hotel, take the handcuffs off, let me out of the car and said, here you go, man. We got you a hotel room for the night. Just stay here and good luck.
That's awesome.
That is a short version.
Oh my God.
That's
amazing true story. So the cops bought me a hotel room. They felt bad that the manager was being such a jerk, and they understood that it wasn't my fault, and that just got real lucky that night.
So that in the background, did you add to any of the destruction in the room while it was going on? Did you get carried away with it too? No,
I didn't, because I was more concerned, like, dude, this is my room. What are you guys doing? So I just started packing my stuff up. So they didn't, I was like, well, we're going to get kicked out of here anyway. So I would say that, like, I did try to stop it. I tried, but once they start that kind of thing, they have to finish. So
don't do that.
Please stop, guys.
Oh man.
Awesome. The 5-1, can you top it?
Yeah, probably how I got my nickname, 5-1. Years ago, the host of a well-known television show was leaving the show to start his music career. And our first run was, we had like 160 people on the tour. We had, I believe it was 18 Davids, 9 of which were on my radio channel, Channel 1. So whenever the artist would call and say, hey, David, I'm out, can you bring me a cup of coffee? Because we had a radio on this bus. And so all 9 of us on Radio Channel 1 would go to catering, get a cup of coffee, and take it to the artist's bus. So after about second or third day, the artist said, hey, we got to come up with a radio code name for you, because, you take care of me. I don't need the other guys. So he says, what are you interested in? And I said, well, I like to listen to conspiracy theories. I love to things. I've been a practicing Buddhist for years. I've always been interested in Area 51. And his eyes got big as saucers. And he said, hey, we're going to be playing in Vegas in about 2 weeks. So I'm going to fly my manager in, and we're going to drive out to Area 51. So the artist, he's like 6'9". His manager looks like he'd be one of the guitar players in 38 Special. And then me, we didn't look too inconspicuous. And so we drive out to Area 51. And long story short, we get about 4 or 5 miles down the dirt road, and we were detained by 2 white Humvees and like 14 guys in full riot gear, and we were escorted back to Vegas. And it was probably the most scared I've ever been, because having 14, 15 guys with guns at the back of your neck and your wrists are tied behind your back. And I was telling the artist the next day at breakfast, I said, that's the most scared I've ever been. And he says, why are you so scared? He says, everyone knows who I am. I said, who's the first person that gets killed in movies? The black guy. So he was writing out the set list as we were loading in. And you know how you're just talking, you kind of just doodle on a piece of paper. He did a 5 and a dash and a 1. He says, that's it. That's going to be your radio code name. So that's how I got my code name.
I love an origin story.
I had kind of given a quick Kraftwerk blurb, but I have an actual funny story since we're going there. So I'll tell it. It was my first day. I took over a tour for a tour manager who was basically, she was pregnant enough that she couldn't travel anymore. So I took over the rest of the touring cycle for her. And it was my very first day on the job. We were doing a live broadcast from the Rivoli Ballroom in London on the BBC. Live. Not even live to tape, but live. Everything's ready. I've totally prepped. Everybody's there. I think it's about a minute to showtime. And the band's all lined up on the side of the stage and the drummer's missing. And we're like, where's the drummer? And we hear this banging from the basement where the band dressing room was. And he just always did a quick trip to the loo before he would run on stage. And the Rivoli Ballroom, if anybody's been there, is real old. And the door wouldn't open to the toilet stall. And he was stuck. And and he's pounding on it. Everybody runs down. We're trying to get it open. He's banging on it. And finally, bear in mind, they're supposed to be on stage, hitting the stage at a minute to go live. So the door got kicked down. And I'm thinking the whole time, like, oh my God, first day of the job, last day on the job. But we got him on stage. They went on live, and it was fine. But oh my God, that was one of those, it was like Spinal Tap and Panic all rolled into one. And I kept my job and finished the touring cycle.
Yeah, I believe that the whole world of every Men in Black movie ever has got to be part of your jobs, where it's like the show's not going to happen. The artist finally makes it on stage against all odds. Then you get them there and the audience has no idea how close the show not happening came. Yeah. And that's the great heroism that is the tour manager, figuring out a way to make that extra 1,000 miles fit in somehow into time that doesn't exist, or get the artist from across the country on a private that no one ever knew was going to happen. We can't thank you guys enough for making time. This was just awesome that you guys were here this morning, got up early and did this with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. We were so exciting.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, everybody, please check out tour management, tourmgmt.org, TM101. Thank you all for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Hey,
We're
thank
legitimate now, apparently.
Woo, woo.
Yay.
Yeah. We're real.
We're real.
Can I put this on my resume?
TM101 is an amazing show. Please check it out. Thrilled to have their entire team here with us today, right here on Promoter 101.
Ba-bum.
Hey, it's David Marcus from Ticketmaster. Get your tickets to hear me on Promoter 101.
The quote of the week comes to us from Rocky Balboa. Every champion was once a contender that refused to give up. That's right, not a real person, Rocky Balboa, but still a great quote.
David Simoni from DSW Entertainment on Promoter 101.
Luke, we've come to the end of the road, but there's great news. We will be back again. We promise that we will be back at least 4 more times.
At least 4 more people that want to talk to us, Dan? I can't believe that.
It's true. I don't know how it happened. There are more Promoter 101s in store. We can give you a little sneak preview of what's coming if you want, like just a little taste. Coming up, Skumek Sabatka. You know him from the world of Rammstein, from the world of Kraftwerk. He's an agent, promoter, manager, triple threat, Germany's own. Skumek will be right here in our March episode. And coming up in April, the manager at Death Cab for Cutie and Postal Service, Jordan Carlin, right here on Promoter 101. Just a little taste of what we have coming up for you in the months to come, Luke.
That Skumek Skabaka interview is going to be something else. Manager, agent, promoter. I mean, that is some serious German efficiency right there. You can buy, sell, manage all in between. I like that. I don't know why we can't do that here over in the States. That seems like a thing that we should be doing.
Because there might be someone forgetting to fuck themselves in that process, Luke.
Either way, those sound like 2 amazing interviews coming up soon on Promoter 101. Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to all of our wonderful guests from ILMC, Mr. Greg Parmley. Make sure that you go register for ILMC 33. It's virtual this year, ILMC.com. Go check it out. And of course, today, long list of thank yous from the whole TM101 crew who joined us today on the podcast. David 51 Norman, Jim Runge, Mark Clark, Henry Bordeaux, Doug Wilson, MJ Kaczka, Adriane Biondo. Thank you all for coming on here. Thank you for doing what you are doing on TM101 to help educate and train the next generation of amazing tour managers and badasses out there on the road taking care of our artists. Thank you so much. If you like what you heard today, please, Dan and I need reviews. Go on the Apple Podcast Store, drop us a review. Let us know what you heard of this podcast. Hopefully give us 5 stars. That'd be great. If you have negative feedback, you can just email that shit to us, steiny@promoter101.net. Dan will respond to the negative ones. Just give us 5 stars. Cheers and call your mother.
Hi, this is Dave Fry, welcoming you to Promoter 101. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia, Silent Partner Management.
Ba-da-ba-ba.